Who was on first? Well, we know who was on first for the Guardians in 2023. And for the most part, it wasn't pretty. It's a position the Guardians need to improve in 2024. So it's time to take a look back at the 2023 first baseman for Cleveland. How that went, you know how that went. Even though they got a surprising source of power from that position, and how it might look in 2024 on today's Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to get started today. I almost said I am Justin. Oof. I am Jeff.
How are you?
Over there's Justin. I got some blood taken out today, so we're gonna, I don't. Whoa, yeah, there we go. So I'm a little bit, bit loopy on top of just medication and everything else for this never-ending lung issue. So it's being for a fun one. Let's put it that way. I'm me. I don't really imbibe in anything, so this is the closest you're going to see me to that state.
Well, we'll see how much you remember about the 2023 season and how much you want to remember about the 2023 season, because we're going to talk about, unfortunately, how things went bad with this season.
Can I ask you a question before we get into it? And maybe this is putting the cart before the horse, as it were. Yeah. But is there a position that you actually have more? For me, I think when I look at 2023 and then I look to 2024, I'm not sure there's a position that I have more hope for this year for improvement. This is the position I might have the greatest wellspring of hope is going to be better, is going to improve, and that there are reasons to be rationally excited for first base next year.
Yeah, I know. I'm very excited about first base. I think this is the most excited I have been for first base since the departure of Carlos Santana. I mean, yeah, it was nice to have him back home when he came back the second time.
He had maybe his best year ever that year. First year he came back. I know he fell off in the second half, but it was he
was an all-star. It was the only time in his career he was an all-star. And then, I mean, the position's been pretty good for Cleveland historically. We've had, Jim Thome, Travis Hafner, he was mostly a DH. Edwin was pretty good. Santana was good.
Paul Sorrento was solid.
Yeah. The Italian.
Listen, I love anyone who's got my current hairline. That's
not many of those left in baseball, unless they're purposely.
But yeah, listen. Again, as Justin popped up there, we're under 100 away from 2K. Why 2K? Why 2K? That was the thing, right?
Your computer will still work if we get to 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. Our page will still work.
So help us get over that. Give us a Thanksgiving present. That's traditional, right? They instead of sending us pies, which also you could feel free to send us pies. But we're not pumpkin. I love pumpkin. We got to pause the show so I can run upstairs and get the eggnog out of my fridge and just sit here this whole episode with a container of eggnog here.
Well, eating. I'll just put on a Will Smith movie.
And I'll just sit here and eat pumpkin pie and watch eggnog, and this will be our worst reviewed episode ever because people love when you eat on an audio medium. But not going to do that. But help us out. Help us out. Go and subscribe.
Help us out.
It's
and
free.
Speaking, it's totally.
Speaking of things that are not free.
Well, I was going to go with the pumpkin joke and say that we all should have realized that the Josh Bell deal was going to be a pumpkin. Going back, I mean, you're the one who's seen this forever with Josh Bell, right? So we're reviewing first base today. If you haven't caught on, we're going to look back at Josh Bell last year. We'll obviously talk about Josh Naylor, who actually played more games at first. We'll obviously talk about Kyle Manzardo, some other guys as well. They signed Josh Bell to split first base and DH with Naylor and be a switch hitting presence that could walk. I mean, essentially, you were hoping for Carlos Santana, right? And you pointed out at the time when the Guardians signed Bell, and even after that, this is a guy whose entire career, he
streaky
has one. Yeah, he has one good half and he has one bad half. Yeah, he is the mean streak, because you know what, the teams or fans are mad if their team has him when he's going in bad streak, and then when you trade him and he goes to another team, they're happy because he's on his good streak. Just like the Nationals in 2022 loved him, cashed in on his first half hot streak. He made the All-Star team, I think, that year. They sent him to San Diego in the with Juan Soto in that deal. Goes to the Padres and falls flat on his face, and he turned into a pumpkin. And then he got to Cleveland in the first half of 2023, and he was still very pumpkin-y. And he got to Miami after that, and
here's what's
he was a little bit better.
Kind of crazy. So last year he had a 150 weighted runs created plus in the first half. That means he was 50% better than your typical average player.
Who?
Josh Bell. 2 years ago.
First half.
Two years ago. 2 years ago. But what's interesting about that, so he had the better first half in 22. In 21, he had the better second half. In 20, he had the better second half. And in 23, he had the better second half. 2019, it was the better first half. But like, just to go over these years, like 2019, 154 in the first half, 101 in the second half. Kind of similar to what happened. 2020, which was terrible, was a 46 and 100. And then in 2021, it was a 100 and a 137. Now, here's what's interesting. I think people think he played better than he actually played this year in the second half when he got traded, because he was super hot, but he wasn't good. Listen, he was great. He had a 139 weighted runs created plus. If this is your first episode, you don't know what that is. It takes all of the offensive production, boils it down into a number. 100 is average. Every 10 means you're 10% better than league average, 20%, 30%. So he was almost 40% better than league average. That's great. But he only had 2 months over 100, only 2 months above league average. I mean, he had 97s, 99s. He was close. He had a 116 in June with Cleveland. So he ended the year with a 96 in his first half and a 114 in the second half. There's a reason he didn't opt out. He was close to a league average bat when you get to be all said and done with this. I can flip a tab and see what his runs created plus this year was a 105. So he was not as good as you think, because he was great in August. After that trade happened, it wasn't that they fixed him. It was that Josh Bell went streaking again. He became Frank the Tank, and he was streaking everywhere. Then he turned back into who he was with Cleveland. He was in 99 for September and October. That's what he was all year with Cleveland. So he was not as good. If you kind of tuned out because he was playing well and then didn't check back in, Josh Bell wasn't good. There's a reason he opted in. This is the story of his life. He's never had 2 above average halves for his career. Unfortunately for Cleveland, he went back to his old ways of slow. But maybe it's fortunate for Cleveland, right? Because if it's the reverse, maybe they don't trade him, and then maybe they're stuck with that contract.
Yeah, that's exactly why they did it, right? I mean, we'll talk about the Kyle Manzardo trade later in the show before we get out of here, and we'll talk about Khalil Watson a little bit too and what happened there. But yeah, if they don't make
Watson
that trade,
right?
That's what everybody wants to talk about, of course. At least this one stays on the field more often, surprisingly. Yeah, I shouldn't have gone there. So, yeah, if they would not have traded Josh Bell, and look, they had to take back Gene Segura's contract to make it work. That's a factor in this deal now as well. But if they had not traded him, then he would be opting into that deal, and you would have Bell back for 2024, and you'd probably get the same story, right? You'd get either a good first half, and you would hope that would propel Cleveland to have a good first half offensively themselves and improve their offense from a year ago and have a little more power, and things will be good. But if he has that good first half, you might as well just assume he's going to fall and turn into that pumpkin in the second half, and it's going to go away. You just don't know which half he's going to have. And I know there's some people out there who are going to say, if you're watching on YouTube, the stats are down below in our scroll, but people are going to say, well, he was much better, with the Marlins when he got there. And yes, he did improve when he got to Miami.
For a month.
For a month. I mean, overall, his average on balls in play jumped 40 points, which isn't sustainable for a guy who's never had a BABIP that high in his career. and his exit velocity actually dropped. So his exit velocity in Cleveland was about 90, and the max was 114. When he got to Miami overall, it was 89, so not much of a drop, and 111. So there wasn't a big drop. And for a month, his launch angle picked up in Miami, and then it fell back again to below 10. This is exactly the problem with Josh Bell's entire career. He doesn't hit fly balls enough for a guy with his power in his bat and for his profile. This is a guy who needs to hit the ball in the air a ton. He's had one season where he finished with a launch angle in the double digits. And I know some people are going to say launch angle doesn't matter. It definitely matters. I'm sorry, it does, because
especially for
power hitters.
For power hitters.
Yeah, and Josh Bell's entire profile, his entire career depends on his ability to hit for power, because he's a first baseman, doesn't run, doesn't defend well, and he doesn't get the ball in the air. And the 1 year he did, he had a phenomenal year. 2019, his average launch angle was 13.1, and that's not even an ideal launch angle. That's actually slightly below. But he hit 37 home runs that year, had a 135 WRC plus, not coincidentally the best year of his career. So this is a guy who's done this entire career. So he might come back to Miami in 2024 and have a great first half and fall apart in the second half. Or Miami might be stuck with a guy who has a terrible first half and they're not going to know what to do with him. But the point is, he's back in Miami. Cleveland's paying part of Gene Segura's deal to get out of that. And they've got Khalil Watson, who we'll talk more about, along with Josh Naylor, with Kyle Manzardo, all that good stuff here as we continue to review the Guardians' first baseman in 2023. Before we get to more first baseman from 2023, let's talk about your opportunities to score with FanDuel this season, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Thanksgiving football coming this week. You've got three games on Thursday. Should be some pretty good ones too. So if you feel confident in the moneyline bets on Thursday while you're watching football with your family, go out and throw some money on it. Have some fun. If you're a new customer, you can have an opportunity to get that $150 from FanDuel. If you're not into moneyline bets, there's a lot of other things you can do with FanDuel, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Drown your sorrows with maybe you're not into conversing with your family on Thanksgiving like some people, and you just want to watch your phone and see if your bets cash out on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Before we get into more first baseman too, I want to let you know Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts from all your Locked On networks, plus national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. We would have talked about Josh Bell on that show had it existed a year ago, but whenever Cleveland never dips into,
I see a lot of people who want to talk about that signing. I just want to make one final note and like discount Cleveland having done it as like, hey, it was a this, it was a that. He was widely considered one of the best bats in free agency in spite of his collapse with San Diego. He had, I'm just trying to remember if he might have won the Silver Slugger in the National League at first base. Like he was
for one good half.
Yeah, and he was so good in that first half that people are like, that's who he is. Like this was, I see people talk about reclamation projects. He was not a reclamation project. Everyone lauded that signing. And listen, I know you're going to tell me your buddy.
And we did too.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying every national writer lauded it. People I trust. I remember Carlos Collazo, who I'm fan of. And yes, I'm friendly with Carlos as well. But I like him over at Baseball America. And he was like, that's a perfect signing for that team. And the thing was that this is a team that had Owen Miller at DH. We're going from Owen Miller to the Silver Slugger at the position in the National League. Yes. Was he perfect? No, that's why he's in that position, because he had a bad second half and he's a DH only and he can't play the field. But that was a solid signing based on the market and everything else. Zunino, that was a gamble. You want to call and say something, reclamation, that was Zunino. This one was one that was universally lauded for a reason.
Yeah, it was a bit of a gamble, but because of his history. I mean, like, everybody can see who Josh Bell is. It's not like he was going to all of a sudden become any different, especially in Cleveland. Like, not an area known, not a team known for developing hitters or finding things wrong with hitters and fixing them. So there was very little chance that they were going to bring Josh Bell in here, and he was all of a sudden going to be a guy who had to finally put together the first good two halves of his career, maybe outside of 2019. He didn't, and that didn't happen. But he was exactly what Cleveland needed. If things had worked out, it would have been great, and it didn't. And there was not another option for them on the market at first base to do that, or /DH. It was a worthwhile upgrade, and it didn't work out. I think it's interesting, though, what they were able to do real quickly with Bell, too, is, look, Khalil Watson may not be anything for Cleveland in the end, because he doesn't make enough contact, and he may not stay at shortstop. There's a lot of things that could have him bust out of baseball before he ever gets there. He's got past behavioral issues that I think have been addressed. Cleveland's pretty good about vetting character, so I don't think they're bringing somebody in they can work with.
He was a lot of immaturity. It wasn't like, listen, it wasn't things like the other Watson in town. It was stupid, immature things for a young kid to do. It takes some growing up. It was not criminal. It was immaturity. And I'm not saying that they don't pretend the bat's a gun and shoot the umpire. That's what he did. That's dumb. Straight up. That is a dumb thing to do. And there was maturity.
Thankfully, it didn't escalate into anything further.
No, but I mean, that's the thing. It's just dumb immaturity things. It's not like he was getting in crimes. It's not like he was doing things like that. It's, we all mature at different rates. We all did silly things in our 20s we look back on and are like, oof, I am glad Twitter did not exist and I was not famous.
Same. So Cleveland was able to turn Bell into, obviously, Gene Segura's contract, and they're going to take a flyer on Khalil Watson, and we're going to see what happens there. I mean, there's a good profile there. He's a good athlete. We'll see if they can work with him or not. But I give Cleveland credit for being creative, not just dumping the salary and getting nothing. 100%. They took Gene Segura's salary back, and they got, it's a boom or bust kind of trade for them, and they cleared Josh Bell out of here so they can make way for Kyle Manzardo, who we still have to get to. So let's get to Josh Naylor next, who played the bulk of the games at first base for Cleveland last year and had the best year of his major league career. Unfortunately, he missed a month of time, which seems to be an issue for him. What we have to talk about is this guy has never played more than 122 games in his career, 122 and 22 and 121 and 23. Obviously, we know 21 he had the gruesome knee injury. That may still impact him long term, but he drove in 97 runs last year, which, for what that's worth on a bad offensive team, give him credit for being able to do that. But
I'm just going to tell you, RBIs matter nothing. And hire him. You can go ahead and tweet at me. RBIs bring no value.
No, but it was the best year of his career. And what Josh Naylor was able to do last year was improve against left-handers. Yes, he was still a very good player. Borderline all-star. I don't know. Borderline. But he hit 299, 347, 474 against lefties last year for a 127 WRC plus. By far the best year of his career against left-handers. This is a guy who did not hit left-handers at all in his career before last year. The question is, the two questions for Josh Naylor are this. It's, can he stay healthy enough to play more than 120 games? Can he continue his success against left-handers? Because he's in year 3 of 4 of arbitration. He's got 2 years left before he hits free agency at age 28.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things when I was looking at this positional breakdown is the fact that if you looked at what are the 3 positions that had the most instability, the 3 positions that had the biggest gap between the guy who played the most games and the guy who played the second most games, the smallest gap. Basically number 1 was catcher, number 2 was shortstop, number 3 was first base. And that's because of, they did have to rotate some guys in, but it's also health. And that's going to stand out more and more for me with Naylor. It's like the bat is so good. We can get in this debate of, could he go back to the outfield? And my answer is always going to be no. If anything, we'll get into Manzardo in segment 3, but Naylor's health is such a limiting factor to that bat and that production that losing him for a month every year at least is a killer. And if having him play DH almost exclusively helps that, then you have to strongly consider it. And was he our first baseman last year? Yes. Was he very good at it? Yes. Should he be our first baseman next year? No, he should not be. It should be Kyle Manzardo from the start. It should be Josh Naylor, DH. Let Naylor never play more than like 20, 30 games in the field. Let's do what we can. Let's, I don't care what the NBA says. I think workload management is real. Let's do workload management, help Josh Naylor stay healthy, because that's just something that's been an issue before his horrific injury. And the fact he's come back from that the way he has is still kind of a minor miracle. But yeah, and I will also be curious to see, he started last year so terribly, if he's just going to be a slow starter every year. So let's just kind of keep that in the back of our minds if Josh Naylor comes out and has a rough start. Excuse me.
Well,
he had a rough start. Of the world.
But remember too, we also feel like he was getting unlucky. A lot of the underlying data show that he was getting unlucky that first part of the year. So have to see whether or not that ended up being a factor or not. I also want to go back to and say that before the injury, really Naylor had not ever established himself. So a lot of the missed playing time, I think, was a lot to do with the fact that he just was not playing well and he couldn't earn himself more at bats because he didn't play well. He wasn't good in San Diego, and he was
not
somewhat good after he got here, and then
not really. He really wasn't good until he wasn't good until after his injury. It's like
right, he didn't get good until then, which is a testament to him.
Yeah,
and he is kind of Cleveland for right now. He is Cleveland's kind of emotional leader on the field. He's very intense, very well liked by the fan base. There is all that stuff. And I know people are going to ask, what about a Josh Naylor contract? What are we doing about that? Is that a possibility? We have addressed that in the past, but you know what? Since we're talking about first base today, Jeff, we're going to address it again here in just a minute. All right, Jeff, you and I both agree. So Josh had a good year last year. And the biggest questions for him is, I'm not saying it's unfair. You set high when you're a player like this. You're gonna set higher expectations for yourself. So now that he did what he did this year, you're gonna, people are gonna ask, can you repeat it? And he's got the health issues, but he is, like I said, he is 26. He'll be 20. He's projected to be a free agent at age 28. He's at ARB3 this year. He was a Super 2 player, which means he earned top 22% of service time his first year in the majors. So he got an extra year of arbitration added on to his contract. So he has 4 years of arbitration. So that's 2 more with Cleveland he's going to get. Otherwise, he'd be an ARB2 this year. But a lot of people want to ask, will the Guardians offer Josh Naylor an extension? And you and I have both agreed on this in the past that it's not going to happen. I say that as somebody who I wish it was possible, but I don't think that we've said in the past also that neither parties are likely to align on what they're looking for in an extension. Josh is going to want something long-term. We're talking 5 or 6 years, and Cleveland's not going to want to commit that to him because of the injury, because of his size, because of just lack of positional flexibility with how that's going to go. And I know a lot of people say, let's get a short-term deal. He's going to want to hit free agency at the right time. It's either give him a long-term deal now or he's going to want to hit free agency and get his one chance to cash in, because it's a tough profile to cash in at, and he may have one chance at this.
Yeah. And I know people are always like, hey, you can't paint with that wide of a brush. He might want to play with his brother. Like we've seen throughout sports. Yeah, it's fun to play with your brother, but even when it's like it's like outside of the Marcus and Markieff Morris in the NBA, who literally had one bank account, we haven't seen any guys really take discounts.
Brooke and Robin. Done that in the NBA.
to do that. Guys typically max out. And when you are a guy like Josh Naylor, who's had a massive, scary injury that could have been a career ender, that often makes you more likely to want to max out. And it's not about, I know people talk about the idea of like, oh, then he might be more susceptible to wanting to get that contract, getting long-term security. Not when you're 2 years away. Like the long-term security play is when you have 4 years of team control. At this point in time, he's already making money. The long-term security play has been missed. And it comes down to, from Cleveland's point of view, there's 3 big points. 1, injury history. 2, size and weight. And 3, positional value. And that's going to line up with Cleveland not necessarily jumping at signing him. And then from his perspective, he's very close to free agency. And, he's got probably one big contract in him. And hitting at 28, you are going to be at the ideal spot to maximize that. And especially
he's got one chance.
Yeah. And when you look at first base value, look at like CJ Cron and how he was productive for years and kept getting like small deals. You think that plays off
Only
in Cleveland's favor. Yeah. And it doesn't play off in Cleveland's favor because Naylor is more dynamic. There's more of a ceiling, but it also is a thing where I think guys know when you are a first baseman, your value starts to fall away in your 30s unless you are the top 1%. And I don't know if he's going to stay the top 1%. He's not even necessarily the top 1% now. He's kind of that second tier, which is very good, borderline all-star. But yeah, I know we're going to just get hate mail in the comments. And listen, if I'm playing an OOTP and I look at him and I'm like, oh, hey, it says his injury rating is only average. Of course, I'm trying to extend Josh Naylor, but this is an OOTP.
Yeah, all that long term. Some people will say, well, give him a short-term deal. He's not taking a short-term deal. No. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be 6 years. Cleveland would love to get him on a 4-year deal or something starting right now and buy out 2 more years of free agency. But that doesn't make sense for Josh, so he won't do it. And maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe he will defy the norm. And
was it Jake Cronenworth just got, was it 7 years, $80 million or something like that?
Yeah. It just, I don't see him passing up.
No. And
he's that sort of money.
And that's the type of money I think he's going to want, is something like 7 years, probably maybe 90 million, like something in that Cronenworth area. Maybe it is the 80, but he probably would want something similar to that contract.
Well, one of the reasons Cleveland probably won't consider a contract for Josh Naylor is now they have Kyle Manzardo, who they acquired at the trading deadline for Aaron Savali. And I know a lot of people complain about this deal, and we're going to find out why. The question is when. So I got to be honest. I don't see right now any reason why Kyle Manzardo should not be on the opening day roster of this team. And saying that we don't know who the rookie of the year candidates are going to be. There's a good chance like Jackson Holiday might be up next year for Baltimore and he could win rookie of the year. There's a lot of variables that go into this, but guys get hurt. And for Cleveland, Kyle Manzardo probably represents one of their best 9 hitters going into April next year. So, rookie of the year, draft pick status aside, if Kyle Manzardo is one of your 9 best hitters and there's any chance that you could recoup a draft pick by having him on the opening day roster, it should be done. I don't see any reason why Kyle Manzardo shouldn't be on the 40-man roster, on the opening day roster. And this hopefully is your long-term solution at first base. Because if you're watching on YouTube, again, subscribe on YouTube. Stats are up there at the bottom of the ticker. He did much better coming into Cleveland after he got healthy.
And I want to do one last shout out to the Josh Bell thing. I want to point out he had the 7th highest salary of any first baseman in baseball a year ago. So for all the cheapness, it was still the 7th highest. So just throwing that in there. To me, Manzardo is the top prospect in the system. It was about this time a year ago where I declared, one Tanner Bybee, the top prospect, and I'm going to do it now again with Kyle Manzardo. And yeah, when he came over, his numbers were mediocre. And I want to explain why they're mediocre. He was hitting the ball harder than he'd ever hit it. He had changed his approach. He was working on a new swing. He was trying to tap into more power, and we saw success towards the end of the year. On top of that, he was dealing with a bum wing. And again, you can find a lot of articles on this. This isn't me speaking out of school. He has an extremely sick mother who can't travel. She can't even leave the state to see him. So he's walking around carrying that internally. And any of us who have had a sick parent knows what that's like. That is just part of the mental drain on top of everything else. And that's not to like say anything other than I hope his mom gets healthy and everything gets together, but also to point out like that is something that is out there and that's something that can't help but affect him. And he just got better and better as a hitter. And all the numbers look really good with him. And I agree. Like, yeah, if you call him up, he's going to get the full year of service time. That's going to happen. You know what? If he is someone you really, truly believe in, and I think, listen, they knew that they were going to be massively under the gun by trading for him. So if you believe in him, get that contract signed now. Like, extend him before he gets up.
Prediction: Kyle Manzardo gets a contract before Josh Naylor does. I think that's not a hot take. We are running short on time in this episode. We wanted to talk about some other depth, things like that. David Fry, fits in at first base for Cleveland next year. People are going to ask about John Kenzie Noel. And then we want, there's also certainly worth talking about Ralphie Velasquez at first base. Should he have the bat come along before the glove, which is honestly the best case scenario. I'm just going to say right now, John Kenzie Noel is not an outfielder. He's a first baseman. That's why we would talk about him here. But
he's not
Jeff
a prospect to me.
He's not. Yeah, Jeff and I are both pretty low on Noel. Maybe we'll throw up a quick short on that. Maybe we'll discuss that. Maybe a little bonus.
Not a top 30 guy. Not a top 30
Yeah,
guy.
maybe we can do a little add-on, a little bonus on that, or we can come back next week. This is our last show of the week, so everybody have a good and happy and safe Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with your family, and we'll be back on your YouTube feeds and your podcast feeds starting next Monday morning with lots more good stuff. Hopefully coaching announcements. We're still waiting for the coaching staff to fill out, so stay tuned for that.
We'll probably carry a little of the first base into next week, so look forward to that. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed, have a friend subscribe, and go